And the disagreement on the ownership of the economy raises the following key questions. Do ANC leaders speak with one voice on radical economic transformation? And does Manuel's position reflect the views of a particular faction within the ANC? And are ANC economic policies different from government programs of action? And is state capture used as an excuse not to radically transform the economy? And can South Africa afford not to change the ownership patterns of the economy? As always, you're most welcome to participate on social media. It's at ANN7 TV, or you can give us a ring. In studio, we have Butsang Muilwa, political analyst. Walter Lukuleni is PAC Secretary for Publicity. And we have Alwa Baleni, a political analyst, joining us as well. Good evening to all our guests. Good to have you. It's a brand new week. Much to ponder on, but very interesting that Minister of Police would react to Trevor Manuel. Is this just a sign of an agitation around what's been called white monopoly capital and the denialism that comes with it?
Well, Cindy, good evening again to the viewers and to you. This is a very sad state, of affairs for the ruling party. And it is not that the Minister of Police is responding as the Minister of Police. He's responding as a son of the ANC, as the member of the African National Congress, who have sat in various of their NECs. But again, the ANC has been found caught up in a corner due to not having, exclusively and particularly clear policies like the 1949 program of action that they had, the Youth League had, and they presented to the ANC. Look at what Trevor Manuel is doing at the moment, actually. He is actually bastardizing the ANC constitution, the constitution of the country, by saying the willing buyer, willing seller is not in the constitution of the country of the ANC. It was never in the constitution of the country of the ANC, and it's not everything that is in the policy of a political party that has to be in the constitution of the country of the ANC. He was the Minister of Finance for 13 full years in this country, and he never questioned white monopoly capital, which people like Tony Leon today are standing up and saying it's a new term that is coming into fashion now. It's not new. White monopoly capital has been talked about since the inception of the liberation movement. One of the issues was towards the ANC formation was primarily to take up political power. Secondly, to take up economic power and to defeat white dominance, which includes white capital, which includes owning the resources of the economy like the land. And today, the very same leaders, I'm asking myself if people like Trevor Manuel, who was at the helm of the ANC finances in the country, is he really black? Is he a black person to stand up and not realizing and not knowing or being in denial what is white monopoly capital? Our people have been asking these questions. General South African citizen, what is WMC? Maybe this is an opportunity for us to tell them that it is white people who are absolutely, or more than 80%, owning and controlling the economic resources of this country, which include the land and the mineral resources, and they do not want to share in the ownership and the control of those resources, except with a few elite former ANC members and leaders who are now sitting in comfortable benches and sofas of the white capital. So they are already starting to think, actually, at this moment, like those white masters that they are saving. I'm not surprised that Trevor Manuel, where he's sitting as a chairperson of various white capital-owned industries, he will talk against them. And that's the kind of leaders that the ANC has over years produced to come and bite the same pot that fed them for over the years.
Yeah, so what is the rationale then of the likes of former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel in denying that there's a hegemony and dominance in the economy of largely white people?
Good evening, Cindy. I think the fundamental problem is that he comes from a school of thought that believes that you have to deny, and by denying, it means that it does not exist. The reality is that as far back as 1949, as my learned friend has said, as the custodian of the 1949 program of action as the PAC, we've always said that you cannot reform apartheid. The problem that happened in 94 is that they took a trajectory that says that you can reform it. And by reforming it meant that you kept white control at the helm, you sprinkled it with a few black faces, And obviously those black faces had to be paid out. And if you have been bought out, what have you got to do? You have to punt for your boss.
Yeah,
that is what Trevor Manuel is doing.
Yeah,
he's punting for his white monopoly friends.
It's what was called the Irish coffee syndrome, where you have a sprinkle of black people and then the froth being largely white and the bottom is African. But in dealing with the semantics, doesn't it take away from the real issue that we need to move forward already and have material results in terms of inequality, Alwa?
Evening, Cindy.
Hi.
How are you? And good evening to the viewers. Cindy, this is a very terrible environment and situation that we're faced with, that you have people in this country who can still deny that white monopoly actually exists, because, I mean, that is equal to denying that, for example, that people were killed in Marikana. That's exactly what that statement is saying. It goes back to even Sharpeville. Why were people, I mean, all those massacres that have been happening, why were liberation movements like the ANC itself formed, for example? What were they trying to achieve? What were they trying to fight? That at this particular day in time, we can still say white monopoly doesn't exist. I mean, it goes back, why was conquest actually? I mean, colonialism globally and across, why did it happen? Because white monopoly was in charge, white supremacy was in charge. I mean, there has been a lot of killings, the Holocaust and all those things that, I mean, was intended that a certain race, which is white in this case, is in control of all means of production, slave trade, or you can mention all those things. And that is exactly the picture that is happening in
So
South
let's
Africa.
put in the picture the radical economic transformation that we aspire for all South Africans to enjoy in the wealth and production of this land, and taking the wonderful constitution as well that says you have all these fantastic rights, but because you don't have the means to exercise those rights, i.e. property and access to other amenities, you know, the devil is in the detail in how we get to transform the economy.
Cindy, I'm glad that you are mentioning some of those examples and ways that are being used, like radical economic transformation. The fundamental principle of any nation to exist equally is to be able to be equal in front of the laws and the economy of that nation. We are unequal in this country for historical reasons that I do not want to go into, but we are more unequal in this country than any other thing because of the land and the resources ownership. If black people in this country, who are actually historically the indigenous people of this country and this continent and the owners of this land, were not dispossessed their land by European colonial settlers and perpetuated that dispossession by means of apartheid and segregation laws, we would have not been where we are at the moment. We would have not been sitting with 35,000 white families. That Trevor Manuel is putting a blind eye on that. That 35,000 white families are owning over 73% of the land and productive economic land in this country. We would not be sitting here if the constitution of this country had addressed the ownership of the land that was taken by force and murder and genocide that was committed to the black African people of this country. So I don't understand why a former minister of finance, a former senior leader of the African National Congress will put a blind eye that the country has to come with radical transformation. And radical meaning the status quo cannot remain like it happened during the Trevor Manuel and the Thabo Mbekis and the Nelson Mandela's time, where everything was smooth sailing. Time has come whereby the ANC has been in political power for over 20 years, which is over they are going into the 5th term now to go into the elections. Time has come to say you have asserted yourself well into your political power. Let us now start focusing on transforming or wresting this economic power from the hands of the free minority people, of which most of them as well, these shares of the economy of this country, it's held in overseas stock markets. Its own property in this country, it's owned by foreigners who are sitting comfortably in the US and the UK, you understand, and countries like Germany. These are the things that we should be looking at, that how come we have a reserve bank in this country, that Trevor Manuel actually was the principal of the Reserve Bank, which is owned 63% by a German family. And he doesn't see those things. He probably needs to go back to, let's call Biko in and bring Biko into this whole thing, that when we talk of white capital, we don't talk about only the pigmentation of the skin of white people who came from Europe and owned the land. We talk about people like Trevor Manuel, who have actually become white along the lines of owning capital in this land. And that's what we are talking about.
All right, let's invite Sitaki Khomo, political analyst on the line. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. Now, Fikile Mbalula makes the point that it's the dissonance and that reveals the glaring dissonance among the super black elites and the masses. He says that former finance minister is being dishonest, and part of that is because the black elite has lost touch with the marginalized masses. What's your view? Rekhomo? All right, Walter, while we're patching Rekhomo, just on that we, the black elite somehow have now disowned their obligation, I guess, to leave the door open for others to also
I think,
enjoy.
Cindy, it's to be expected that if you have people that have been bought over by the trappings of white supremacy, they would always pant for the supremacy policies. So I'm not surprised that Trevor Manuel is pushing that position, because he has been enticed away from his own people. He has lost touch, and he's not the only one. There's a lot of them who have lost touch. That is why you would find in a situation like Marikana that you would have had an African person being involved, not in resolving the problem, but actually telling people that you should stop the violence with violence. So the reality is that once in '94 the myth of the liberation came in, it was propagated to such an extent that people felt that we were liberated. We have not been liberated, because nothing in the 1994 settlement talked about land redistribution. Nothing talked about land being brought back to the African masses. The economy is still skewed. It still continues to be skewed. You would find nowadays you have talk of what they call township economy, where they say they are expanding township economy. But when you look down in practical terms, actually what happens is that the African masses, those small spaza shop people, are being marginalized. Your big business comes in. And that's the reality that is there. If you talk to the working class, they will tell you that they continue to be marginalized in that sense. So at the end of the day, white supremacy was not defeated in 1994. What has happened was that some of our African people were bought over. They were told that it was too difficult to continue the struggle, therefore come in, be the shop stewards, run the politics, will run the economy, will give you a few scraps there and there. But I think what is happening now is because the gap continues to grow, and they can't close the gap.
I believe, sorry, Walter, I believe Sitaki Khomo is with us. Good evening to you and welcome. And part of the online article, by the way, if you want to read it, it's on the dailymaverick.co.za online, written by Minister Fikile Mbalula. He also makes the point of quoting Andre Woodendaal in the book Founders, that of 1910, in how the settlers and colonizers organize themselves to ensure that they are entrenched in all the sectors of meaningful production and ownership of the economy. So beyond debating the terminology of white capital, whatever it is, Mr. Khomo, is there enforceable legislation that needs to be introduced, or do we already have enough laws to implement that radicalism that we desire?
Well, I think I would like to say good evening to your guests and also your audience. I would like to say that in South Africa today, we are fortunate to have had a very good policy trajectory as well as legislative intervention at various levels. I think what needs to be done is actually accelerate the radical economic transformation, because it actually is standing as an antithesis to white monopoly capital. Because the degree of inequalities in this country are such that if nothing is done, actually stand on the threshold of possible revolution, because the people cannot afford to wait any longer. They actually have waited too long since 1994. If you look at the situation with regard to who owns the business flow, the business volume that is resident at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, it stands at about 87%, which is white capital owned. That definitely says to you that not much has actually happened since 1994. If you look at also the dominance of the white monopoly capital in terms of different industries, defining almost everything. If you look at the concentration of power into major banks, insurance companies, where Manuel also speaks in terms of Old Mutual Reserve, it says to you that radical economic transformation is something that we don't have an option but have to do. The difficulty, or rather the challenge at the moment, is that the leadership of the ANC should with one voice. The policy conference that is coming up should actually firm up what needs to actually be done, so that each and every leader must then talk of the same language. They must agree as to what are the important elements that constitute radical economic transformation. Probably legislative framework that we have is to be firmed up as well.
Cindy, I just want to differ with Ntate Khomode. You know, the ANC has been developing policies for all these years. And if we think today the ANC will come and produce policies that the leaders will talk with the same tongue, it is not going to work. It is too late for that. Why wouldn't they talk with the same tongue on the current existing policies? It is a shocking. And I think some ANC leaders like Trevor Manuel, Terale Kota, you know, and members or supporters like Mweleti Mbeki, they must be having some level of amnesia, because words and terminologies like radical economic transformation and white monopoly capital, people like Bladen Zimande himself, who has turned more white today than white, he's one of the first people in the African National Congress Alliance who spoke years back about this white monopoly capital. And the very same people today, because they are in cushioned coaches and comfortable positions of money, they are forgetting what the ANC had existed for and what it had intended to achieve. Now, this brings back what we have always been saying, that what has delayed proper economic liberation in this country is some elements and people within the ruling party. They have actually delayed what the ANC as a collective organization could have achieved by now. And they're starting to pop out. You know, they can't contain and suppress these lies they've been living all along and misleading the nation. That's why they are coming out while they are sitting outside government to can show their true colors of the policies that they were pushing.
Yeah, so you're saying that in denying that white monopoly capital or the dominance of the economy by largely white people does not exist. It's a means of self-preservation. And while you're there, throw in the Indian monopoly capital, as referred to by former finance minister, saying that Indian monopoly capital coming from Saxon world, we've heard about the Shebeen, etc. The point I'm trying to make, Walter, is that the black elite, are they more interested in preserving this themselves and what they're enjoying, as opposed to looking at a broader scope of economic participation for the majority?
Cindy, it is a reality of the liberation outcome that you would find that if you have not won the liberation fight at the battlefield and you go and win it at the negotiating table, you would have to compromise. And compromise in this case in South Africa was compromise that said you can take over the political power, but you can't take over the economic power. And the guys like Trevor Manuel are just a manifestation of what the role they've been playing all along, to preserve white monopoly capital. It is a red herring that he is bringing up to say there's now Indian monopoly capital. Maybe soon he's going to come with some black monopoly capital also. Because basically it is a way of deflecting the attention from the real fact that white supremacy still exists in this country and white supremacy is still in charge of the economy of this country. 97% of the land is not back in the hands of the African people. African people cannot run businesses right today. Those who try in the townships, the ghettos, as I call them, get marginalized by big business coming up. You get the shopping malls coming up. And who are the anchor tenants? The very same big business.
Yeah, but can we move away from the victim mentality? I know that Fikile Mbalula also makes the point that, you know, the ones who've got vested interest in the economy will push back by all means, using information wars, going to the courts, etc. So how then do we, Alwa, within the limitations of the Constitution, get to the point where broad-based economic empowerment and radical transformation happens?
Cindy, I don't think we have a limitation. I think what is lacking is probably political will from particularly the leadership of the country that we have. I mean, we seem to be in power, but we are not. Because we controlled from somewhere else, and the white monopoly is actually controlling this country. So the thing that should happen is that leadership that is there currently, if it's ANC that is in leadership currently, they've delayed this process actually, because look, you
know why I said limitations? Let's just take the property clause
Yeah.
That says if you currently occupy and you're using that land, you have to be compensated. You know, even if you can trace it back to colonial forefathers as to how that land was acquired or taken or stolen, the current constitution is such that you have to pay before you can occupy.
But Cindy, that is where you have to start. You can't say that you are going to change this country drastically if you don't change the drastical foundations of 1994. Those foundations are creating the current situation that we are having. So you have to go to the Constitution. And it is the PAC's position that it is not a document that is cast in stone. The realities of the situation should inform us on how we go there. We need to change the Constitution. Those issues like the property clause that you are quoting have to be, we have to go back and look at them. Are they practically implementable? And they are not. We have to change that.
Very briefly,
I had sat on this platform and I was led by the people of this country. You cannot say we've got a good constitution, a glorified one, when that constitution has enshrined the unequal nation, unequal society. Our constitution is absolutely wrong. It will have to be looked into. If the government of the day and those who love this constitution do not do something radically and quickly to can address the economic imbalances of this nation, the people of South Africa will rise and take off the land and all these economic resources by force. It will happen. It's just a matter of time. So if we don't act as politicians and political office bearers and change all these restrictive rules that were adopted, as Walter has said, prior 1994 and post-1994, which enshrined white monopoly governance, you know, by remote control from London and from the pockets and from the stock exchange. That's where we should start. And the government, in conclusion from my side, must also stop pumping money into the white capital. You look at the treasury contracts are with white companies. You look at SAA contracts, they are with white companies. Everything is white that government is doing business with.
All right,
that has to come to an end.
Much appreciated, gentlemen, as always, talking to us about national issues of radical economic transformation, but more specifically on the denialism of whether white monopoly capital exists or not. We hope that clarifies the matter going forward. We had Walter Lukhuleni, a PAC Secretary for Publicity in studio. Aluwa Baleni is a political analyst, and Botsang Muilwa, a political analyst, and on the line, Resitaki Khomo. And thanks indeed for joining us. We take a look at the latest weather update.